those that's come on, and as they come on, they'll get a better understanding of what's really taking place as far as our true heritage. All right. Of course, we understand that slavery did exist and it did take place, and hell, it's taking place today. All right. The thing is that how did they bring millions of us here has been the issue. All right. So we're going to get into that information. All right. So let me go to the screen. Okay. Now, can you see it? All right, so let's get into the presentation. All right, we talked about Lucia, right, which happens to be the oldest fossil that they thus found here in the Americas, in Brazil, South America. Dates back to over 10,500 years old. This is how. What they mean? What they mean? Okay, so this is how they say that she looked. All right, so we know that we've been here over 10,500 years. All right, this is way before the Europeans of 400 years ago claiming to have brought all of us here on some slave ships. All right, did they bring some of us here? Of course, but none as nearly as much as they had us believing, or as we believed that they brought all of us here. All right. But here we have a sister from over 10,500 years ago, right in Brazil, South America. And of course, if they was in South America, that means Central America. That also means North America. So we just have to begin to start having some common sense here. You know, get the book. The first Americans were Africans, documented evidence. All right. Documented evidence. This is by David Imhotep, PhD, and this is also Paleo-American, a primer on ancient American history by Nasir Ali. All right. In Nasir Ali's book, he states that the Paleo-Americans is the first Homo sapiens to inhabit America, the Americas. All right. Predating the Covis culture. This prefix paleo means ancient in Greek. So another way of saying Paleo-American would be American. All right. Or as the emperors always say, the return of the ancient ones. And the return is talking about of our rightful minds into believing that they can no longer BS us into their beliefs. For over 50 years, scientists have known that the Paleo-Americans predated the Covis. Right, one of the earliest Paleo-American ancestors dated approximately 11,500 years before present. All right, so it even goes back even 1,000 years older in the book, 11,500 years. I've even read where it went back to 12,500 years before the present. All right, so it says at the archaeological site in Legor, Santa, Brazil, a female Paleo-American's remains were uncovered in 1975. So they knew about this since 1975. That's 43 years. 43 years they've known this. And you're just getting this information now. Being one of the oldest ancient Americans identified, she is called Lucia Light. Just like they call the one that they found in Africa that dates back to 2.8 to 3.2 million years ago. Her name is Lucy, or Degnash, as she was called within the African language. But Lucy means light. So it says here, her remains are intact enough such that her face was reconstructed by Dr. Richard Nave from the University of Manchester in England. All right. So he states specifically, what is surprising is that Lucia Fax does not look like, fakes does not look like the Mongolian type associated with modern day American Indians, because it's not. In 1999, Walter Neves published a research article, Genetics and the Molecular Biology, where he provided evidence that the first Americans looked more like Australian Aboriginals and Malaysians. The term American, Aboriginal American, and Ancient One will also be used interchangeably with Paleo-American. Right? So we come down. In the United States, people who may fit this phenotypical description are often misnomed as Black. Well, damn. That's the end of the argument. That's the end of the argument. If there ever was one. All right? There's never been one for me. Because if you say that you are African, right, exactly. You say that you're African and you here 400 years ago from the Europeans, then you find out that you had ancestry that was already here nearly 12,000 years ago. What can you say? Except you've come back home, or you have come home elsewhere, but you still had ancestry that was already here. All right. So here this is Dr. David Imhotep. He states in his book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. And the first Americans were Africans, right? Author and academic David Imhotep, PhD, is bringing forth decades of research and evidence to present readers a comprehensive look into the history and identity of the first Americans, asserting that the Africans were the first Americans and that they arrived 51,000 years before the Mongolians. Damn, he went even further back. So they talking about Lucia from approximately 10 to 12,000 years ago, but he's given documented evidence in his book that they arrived over 51,000 years ago. And I can verify that. And matter of fact, we got information that dates back even further than that. Imhotep illustrates a date that the 4 times earlier than what is largely referenced. Africans may not only came before Columbus, but were in the Americas long before any other group, at least 56,000 years. At least 56,000 years, say Imhotep. And with this book, I produce and expand on evidence from several scientific fields, credible scholars, professors, and researchers. So if you want to debate, then you go and debate the book. Because you can't debate me on the subject, because I read the books. So this is for those in which that attempt to just say, oh, we just came to America. Oh, the Europeans brought us all here. Oh, whoa, with me. Oh, shit. The voyage from Africa on ancient ships were quite a possible undertaking based on the capabilities of the vessels of the period and the historical material stated it took place. This is Dr. Julian Whitewright, all right, maritime archaeologist, University of Southampton. right? We know that they came. Because here, explorations in the Grand Canyon, mysteries of the immense, rich, covering brings buoyance brings to light. And he says, remarkable finds indicates ancient people migrated from Orient. What Orient? Right? Because you be thinking of Orientals. You thinking from Asia. What are they talking about? From Egypt. And here it is. The Egyptians came to the Grand Canyon around 1700 BC. And before that, this is proven by the fact that there are 18 temples in Arizona at the Grand Canyon. Below is an article from the Arizona Gazette, Friday evening, March 12th, 1909. So here it is, 100, nearly 100, over 109 years. 109 years they knew that the ancient Egyptians came here. They covered it up. It says in the book, in Archaeological Cover-Ups by David Hatcher Childress, he states perhaps the most amazing suppression of all is the excavation of an Egyptian tomb by the Smithsonian itself in Arizona. A lengthy front page story of the Phoenix Gazette on April the 5th, 1909, which I give both of these front page articles, gave a highly detailed report of the discovery and the excavation of a rock-cut vault by an expedition led by Professor S.A. Jordan of the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian, however, claims to have absolutely no knowledge of the discovery or its discoverers. Interesting. So they don't know Professor S.A. Jordan? And how he got his name? Come up. All right, so here it is. Here's an actual metroneture of the ancient seagoing vessel used by the Egyptians and Nubians in ancient times. All right. And are the Nubians and Egyptians the same people? Yeah. 2009 study shows that the Nubians, the closest people ethnically to the ancient Egyptians. Here's another example of the boats in which that the ancient Egyptians had, way before 1700 BC. All right. Here's another metroneture, hieroglyphics. All right, here's an actual replica of a ship, small size. Here's another example. And as you see, looks like they also had scopes, right? Or they was also using navigational methods. Look like a sail that was once on here, but is no longer here now. Here's another example of the ancient Egyptians on boats. Now they have oars. This is all within the British Museum, as well as also in the Cairo Museum. And for those that have stupid comments such as, oh, they're going to have boats in the museums, yeah, that's where they keep them at, especially if they're old. Here's another example, and as you see, this is clearly us, the Egyptian Nubians, as you see here. In fact, a storm over Egypt. Let's read. It says, Egypt has crossed the Atlantic Sea in ships more than 10,000 years before the time of Christ. That's 12,000 years ago. That correlates to Lucia, 10 to 12,000 years ago, as we've seen. They had built the world's largest cities in South and Central America and in Mexico. This is where you get the pyramids from, all over the globe. They had united those city-states into a nation that stretched from Brazil in South America to Mexico and into Africa. That goes right along with the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. But they stopped a little bit at Libya instead of taking their asses all the way into Egypt, which sits right next door. It says, I have broken the seal on the forbidden histories. I have found the writings that told how Egypt had built its most powerful empire, and it had happened in the Americas. Three of the world's most powerful religions has come out of Egypt, and now their most fearful secret was uncovered, that we was already here. Now, if the European only came upon the planet 6,000 years ago, and we was the first people in the Americas, at least 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, and of course, we're going to keep going back because Dr. Imhotep said 51,000 years ago, and that he even estimated that it was 56,000 years ago. I would go and venture that if you read Forbidden Archaeology, as I keep saying over and over again, by Michael Creedmoor and Richard L. Thompson, 600 million years ago in the Americas. Got to read the book. But here is an actual ship. So no longer are we just looking at the ships as the Metro Netra drawings, paintings, carvings, but now we're actually looking at an actual ship of the ancient Egyptians. So Egyptians traveled the oceans. We have proof. All right? We have proof. And this is in the Cairo Museum also. So once again, yeah, they have ships in the museums. And guess what? This ship dates back to 3,500 years ago, approximately. Get the book, get the magazine, Ancient American Magazine, the Archaeological of the Americas before Columbus. Before Columbus. Go down to the lower right hand, and it says an Egyptian presence in BC America. An Egyptian presence in BC America. All right. Go over to the left now. 40,000-year-old footprints in Mexico. 40,000-year-old footprints in Mexico. All right. We keep showing proof over and over and over again. And you still have nonsense being rippled across the internet trying to disprove it. Right here, it says America, it says right here, it says America are reached, and it will appear that while all the sublime in the historical present centers upon Egypt, all that is sublime in the prehistoric past centers upon America, Atlantis. The Caribbean islands are Atlantis, the remnants of the Atlantis. Just like the Hawaiian Islands and the Pacific Islands are the remnants of Lemuria, destroyed from volcanic activity and earthquakes, as the curtain which has hitherto concealed the prehistoric connection between the peoples of ancient Egypt and of America is lifted, it will be seen that the people of the eagle on the now being descended from the original people of the eagle on this continent. Cause think about it. If you came from Africa millions of years ago, like 600 million years ago, according to Forbidden Archaeology by Michael Creedmoor and Richard L. Thompson, and then you leave after you develop ship technology and you go back into Africa, back to your brothers and sisters, okay? After that 600 million years, of course you're the same people, regardless if you're in America or if you're in Africa. You're the same people. Because you were the only people on the goddamn planet. Can we get this through your heads? You're the only people on the planet. The European just got here 6,000 years ago. Okay? The people of the eagle on the Nile is being descended from the original people of the eagle on this continent. The Twine are one. And the prehistoric America was the original Egypt or Eagle land prior to the mighty disposition. In the days of the Pelag, which the earth was divided, and the great globe itself was nearly rent asunder. All right? Say Augesi. It says, firstborn among continents, America has been forcibly denominated to the New World. Hers was the first dry land lifted out of the waters. Hers was the first shores washed by the oceans that envelop all the earth besides. And while Europe was represented only by islands raised here and there above the sea, America, which is Atlantis, already stretched all the way into Nova Scotia. All right. So we was already here. It's stretching an unbroken line of land from Nova Scotia to the far west. It says, of this, can be no doubt. The pyramids was built by Atlanteans long centuries before Egypt was a civilized country, meaning that the Atlanteans who became the Egyptians left and built and began to start building pyramids all over the world. But guess what? The Atlanteans were still Africans, because we found the oldest relics in Africa according to the book, or books rather, The Hidden History of the Human Race and Forbidden Archaeology by Michael Cremo and Richard L. Thompson, that 2.8 billion year old, right? Billion with a B, all right? That these particular objects, over 200 of them, metallic spears have been found there in South Africa, right? So the Bantu, all right, were those people, all right? The Bantu. And I get into, we'll get to that. And guess what? Most of us have Bantu heritage. And come to find out that the Bantus are the 100% humans upon the planet. Everyone else are hybrids. Okay, everyone else are hybrids. It says Kentucky itself, where we think we have found the remains of an Egyptian colony. Oh, they found the remains of an Egyptian colony and just happened to call it King Tut, huh? Kentucky. Wow. Or nation. Right. So they already knew that this dynasty went back to the 18th dynasty. King Tut, right? His father, Akhenaten, was Amenhotep IV. The Amarna nation was already they came here. And it says, as in the case of the works and the catacombs of Lexington, is a latitude but 5 degrees north of Egypt, so that whether they may have visited America on a voyage or expedition or exploration, or has been driven on the coast against their will, in either case, it would be perfectly natural that they should have established themselves in that region. Of course. Right, so Egyptian artifacts found across North America. Check this out now. Egyptian artifacts found across North America from the Algonquin writings. That means the Algonquin language was part Medu Neter, Egyptian, Kemetic, Temerian. On the east coast of the artifacts, and the Egyptians placed names in the Grand Canyon, are all signs of the early arrival in the Americas by Africans. right? What about the tribes of North America? Where did they come from? The tribes of North America were a result of the Olmecs, all right? And the Mexicans. However, some of the Mexicans continued to mix with the remaining Chinese and produce yellow tribes like the Pablo and the Manso. The yellow tribes mixed in with each other and produced tribes like the Chinook, the Tutuni, um, Halupuya, Kumash, Onuk, and others. Tribes broke off from each other and produced even more tribes that settled in California. The darkest skinned tribes were the tribes that managed to contain much of the Olmec blood, like the Arapaho, Arikara, Blackfoot, who actually, the Blackfoot here in North America, this is why it's called the Tar Heel State, is because you have a tribe called the Halawa Sapani tribe. The Halawa Sapani tribe. Right? They were all the Blackfeet or Blackfoot. Right? You have the Cheyenne, the Crow, the Apache, the Mandan. All right. You have the Lumbee. You have the Micmac, the Montauk, the Washita. All right. All right. The Washita was an offshoot of the Pawnee Confederation. When the Moors came to America, they mixed in with the Washita Native Americans and became known as the Washoe. So the Washita Moors are the so-called lost tribe of Indians that are spoken about in history books. Yes, they are the hidden tribes that were the descendants of the Olmecs, Toltecs, Incas, and Aztecs, Mayans of Mexico. The Washita tribes are also the ancestors of such tribes as the Pawnee, the Osage, the Creek, the Seminole, which is actually the Yamasee, the Creek, all right, which is the Muskogee, the Cherokee, all right, the Chippewa, the Comanche, Nez Perce, Tuscarora, Ginnashin, Manapani, Powhatan, Micmac, Lumbee, Mandan, Blackfoot, Nessie, Neschi, Chickasaw, and many more tribes. All right, many more tribes. And also the Washita are partly Arawak Haitian, which are both Olmecan Ish people, who were Dogon, Mandan peoples originally from Egypt, the Nubians, Kushite people, the said Ethiopians, Egyptians. All right. If that hard to believe, well, go to Samuel George Morton, MD. All right. He wrote, a European, Albion, wrote the book called An Inquiry into the Distinctive Characteristics of the Aboriginal Race of America, Boston Society of Natural History, April 27th, 1842. This is what he says. It is my chiefly intention to produce a few of the most strikingly characteristic traits of these people to sustain the position that all the American nations, except for the Eskimo, are of one race. Of course, because there was no other race here until the Eskimo, who were the Mongolians, came from out of China, and that this race is peculiar and distinct from all others. All possess alike the long, lank black hair, the brown or cinnamon colored skin, copper colored, the heavy brow, the dull, sleepy eyes, the full and compressed lips, and the solid but dilated nose. These traits, moreover, are equally common to the savage and civilized nations. Whether they inhabit the margin of rivers and feed on fish, or rove the forest and subsist on spoils of chase, it cannot be questioned their physical diversities do occur, equally singular and inexplicable, as seen in the different shades of color, varying from a fair tint to a complexion almost black. Well, damn, that fits all of us. And he's saying that they are the Aboriginal race of America. And this too under circumstances in which climate can have little or no influence. So he's saying that even in cold climates, it ain't had no influence. They were still almost black. So also in stature, the difference are remarkable in entire tribes, which moreover are geographically proximate to each other. These facts, however, are more exception to a general rule and do not alter the peculiar physiognomy of the Indians, which is a indeviatable, indeviatedly, characteristics as that of the Negro. He says it. It's undeniably the same. The same. They are the same. The Aboriginal race of America looks the same as the Negro, from which, for whether we see him in an athletic Carib, as in the Carib Indians, which the Caribbean islands are named after, or the stunt Chama in the dark Californians, or the fair Bogra or Boricua, which of course the Boricua, of course, is the Puerto Ricans, as they were called, rich port, but we call them actually the Arawak, the Taino. He is an Indian still. Hold up, the Negroes are Indians? Wow. Maybe he need his eyes checked. You know, being that, you know, this was back in the 1800s now, you know, maybe he needed his eyes checked. You know, he was working for the Boston Society of Natural History. You know, Harvard was all up in there, right? So April the 27th, 1842, he was seeing Indians that looked like Negroes. Yes. That's right. Othello's children, right? Othello's children in the New World. Exactly. Exactly. He does drop that. Right. Jane Baptiste Leonard Durano, A Voyage to Senegal, Atlas of the Region, page, all right, page, I believe is 85. But here it is, 1802 now. So this is going back even 40 years before. What does John Baptiste have to say about that? I shall add another reflection of public utility. The blacks are a kind of man destined by nature to inhabit Africa and America. We're destined by nature to inhabit America? We know about Africa. Wait, even America? It says, she has created them for burning regions. Let us therefore take care not to oppose her view or overthrow the barrier which she has established, but let us preserve their races in their natural purity and not permit the Negroes to inhabit Europe. This mixture of black and white is dangerous to our population, and in time it may change, corrupt, and even destroy it. 1802. 1802. All right, 216 years ago. Man, God, and Civilization by John G. Jackson. He states, I've seen a statuette of Negro in the archaeological collection of Mr. Esteno Ernesto Franco in Quito, Ecuador. According to the opinion of local archaeologists, this statuette is at least 20,000 years old. The Architectonists, black race in America, were either gradually mixed with the Indian ones. Actually, they're one and the same, as we just finished reading, at least by 1802, or became extinct, which we didn't. Most was a lot, I should say, spread it out throughout North, Central, South America. Some was taken into slavery. Some was in the Caribbeans or Caribbeans or Pacific Islands, whatever the case is. But in a very remote time, Negroes or Negroids were numerous in the New World. We know that. Page 40. Here it is, dark races of men. Dark races of men. All right. This is a book by Robert Knox, right? Page 148. He says this, right? They are confined to no particular zone. See, this is what we think. We think the Africans just stayed in Africa. They didn't leave Africa until recently, because that's what the European told you. But it says here, but spread as it were from pole to pole. So from the Arctic to the Antarctica circle, we were. If the Lapps be a dark race, then the dark race exists in Europe as a race. Asian abound with them, with the dark races. So Europe and Asia had dark races. Africa has always been considered their stronghold, and unquestionably, from the Mediterranean shores to Cape Al-Ghaz, the thick-lipped as Copt or Bajjaman of all shades, but the fair prevailing throughout. But it is in America, the last discovered but civilized European, where we find the stronghold of the colored race. From the land of fire to the ice abound, polar caps or polar sea, nature has darkened every race unmistakably. Shit, he started rhyming. The shit got so damn good to him. He started rhyming because he seen all them niggas up in there. All them niggas in America. He said, but it is in America, the last discovered but civilized European, where we found the strong whole of the colored race. From the land of the fire to the ice-bound polar sea, nature has darkened every race unmistakably. That's a poem. Shit, we get into poems. Well, shit, let's go to James Baldwin. James Baldwin said around the age 5, 6, or 7, it comes as a great shock to see Gary Cooper killing off the Indians. And although you're rooting for Gary Cooper, the Indians are you. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. So see, right. So see, the thing is that we have gotten so used to seeing Tonto. See, those that is my age, you grew up watching The Lone Ranger and Tonto. All right, Kimasabi. Okay, that's what happened. That's what happened. You know, so you seen this mongrel or Mongolian looking type, Chinese looking type, Indian. And that's what told you, the TV, that, oh no, those are Indians. The Indians couldn't possibly be you. Yet all these crackers are saying it. Many accounts incorrectly classify us as Indians, descendants of the people who immigrated in waves across the Bering Strait in the Pacific Ocean. Yet research indisputably shows we had established elaborate communities and social orders for tens of thousands of years before the arrival of any Asian migrant or barbarous invader. The so-called red population of the Western Hemisphere, who claim no ownership of the land, are our ardent brothers and sisters who emerged from the empire. The names Blackfoot and Tar Heels are example of the loosened attempts to hide the true identity of our people. This is why I'm in the Tar Heel state. Other names used to divide indigenous people are Creek, Cherokee, Hopi, Iroquois, Hokum, Navajo, Shoshone, Nessie, Biloxi, Seminole, Chickasaw, etc. The cultures of the Olmecs, Toltecs, Mayans, Aztecs, and Incas, who evolved into sophisticated societies in the area known as the Central and South America, MU, can all be linked to distinct traditions and artifacts originating in the Washita Deductamanya Empire. The Eurocentric practice of dividing and classifying our people has created an illusion of differences used to conquer the native people. We are all one people, children of the one and only God. Right, we go to Ancient and Mighty Britons, page 374. All right. The Englishmen who had colonized the western shores of the Atlantic, not more than a generation or two before Groff, spoke of the Indians there as being as black as gypsies. Oh shit, he said on the western shores of the Atlantic. Oh, I'm on the western shores of the Atlantic. I'm in North Carolina. Oh, so you telling me from New York down to Florida, maybe from Maine down to Florida, it was melanated people? Well, he says it spoke of the Indians there as being black as gypsies. 1676. Oh shit, now we going back even almost 200 years further back. 1676. The native races of the New England was spoken of indifferently as Indians and Moors. And Moors. And our British Indians were also remembered. Check this out. And our British Indians. So they had British Indians who was black as gypsies, were also remembered as Moors. Gross is virtually telling us that large companies of Moors or black people roamed up and down the country rather than 100 years ago, taking very considerable contributions from the farming classes and others, besides being possessed of many fierce and aggressive qualities. And these Moors at that quite recent period has not relinquished the custom that distinguishes those black people against whom Caesar fought. So Caesar fought against these so-called black people in the 18th century. Moors were also painted people. Why? Because it was the war paint. It was the war paint. Right? This is why they still put the war paint even now in football, the black marks under their eyes. Even today, because football symbolizes a war between two teams. Get Negroes and the original Indians, proof in the Jesuits' letter. The book Africans and Native Americans by Jack Forbes. He paints, all right, Jack Forbes paints a very different picture of history than what most of us were taught about the origin of black people in the Western Hemisphere. We was taught that black people came from Africa as slaves, that the Red Indians was the true Native Americans, and that white people took blacks from Africa and stole the land of the Red Indians. This story is nothing but a giant fiction, a novel made up by white historians to deceive the masses about the original history and peoples of the Americas. Forbes used the letters of the Jesuits missionaries to prove the Negroes or black Moors were the first Americans, and in fact were black and olive-toned people found in the Western Hemisphere. Commenting from the Jesuit letters on the appearance of the Native Americans, Forbes states, for example, in 1519, oh shit, he keep going further and further back. It is said of the Brazilians, non sono, Nazir, Ninira, Madi color, the that is to say, as not black or white, but of olive color. But the same writer remarked that the Brazilian canoemen he saw were so black that they could have been taken for sailors on the Sea of Styx, which is in hell. Oh, United. For example, all right, it says in right here, it says in 1524. Just check this out. The Carolina Coast people were said to be of dark color, not much unlike the Ethiopians. All right. So I can do it. All right. Right. So that means the people of Carolina look just like the Ethiopians, and Ethiopians are Africans. So that's the reason why they said that. Why they call you African Americans? Because they know that the people in 1524, your ancestors, all right, look just like. They was dark colored, not much unlike the Ethiopians, who are white, the Cushites, which Prophet Noble Drew Ali tells us in chapter 47 that be all the Cushites, old man Cush. The term Negroes and Indians were used interchangeably. Oh shit now. To describe the natives of the journals of the early missionaries who could not have possibly been referring to Africans. Why they couldn't been referring to Africans? Well, from 1549 through 1565, the letters of the Jesuit missionaries in Brazil, usually addressed to the colleagues in Portugal or Spain, frequently referred to the Americans as Negroes. In April of 1549, Manuel de Nobrega, the leader of the Jesuits, addressed a letter from Bahia to Samuel Rodriguez in Lisbon, in which he refers to the Portuguese in Brazil as living in sin because of their having many negras, females, negras, and lots of children by the said black women. They was fine. Most of you Negroes want to go to Brazil today. Thus, the Jesuit fathers called the American women living in Portuguese men negras, a term which, according to Leite, could not have been denoted people from Africa because in 1549 there was a few or no African women in Bahia. All right, there was few to no African women in Bahia or Bahia. None to few. And if they were, they would have been mixed in just like everybody else, just like they bought 400,000 here, right? 500,000 here to America, who mixed in with the millions that was already here, and then just end up calling us African American. Then it should be American African because the major should go first, not the minor. All right. In other words, the majority of our heritage, according to the Empress, 85% of our ancestry was already here. Only 15% was brought from Africa recently within 400 years. So therefore, that means that we should be American Africans if that's the case. I mean, think about it. Are the Europeans referring, being that they say that all people come from out of Africa, are they referring to themselves as African Europeans? Are they referring to the Asians as African Asians? Oh, no, that's only your dumb ass. Okay. Anyway, in a brief narrative of the encounter between the early colonialists of New England and the native Indians, I find it states that these unfortunate gentlemen were intercepted by 700 Moors. By 700 Moors. So the native Indians that they talk about of New England, they also refer to them as Moors once again. So to the early settlers, Moors and Indians are used interchangeably, at least in ancient and moderate Britain, by David McRitchie. Get the book. In 1539, the first ever landing crossing of the United States was complete by Ezemori, a Muslim Berber. In 1654, English explorers report a colony of bearded men in North Carolina who called themselves Moors. Sound like the same people that we just finished talking about. And dropped to their knees to pray while working silver smelting operations. In 1670, Turks and Moors were excluded from slavery by the Virginia National Assembly. All right, and this is before. Notice now, this is 100 years before the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between the United States and Morocco. And the Turks and Moors was already excluded from slavery by the Virginia National Assembly. On March 3rd, 1753, Abel Condor and Muhammad petitioned in Arabic for their freedom from slavery in South Carolina. On June 28, 1786, a declaration of naval peace between the Moors and America was signed by Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Tahir bin Abdelhak Finish, actually the Bey. All right. In 1787, a treaty of peace and friendship between the Cherokee and the United States government. See, you've been told that it was between Africa, Morocco and Africa. No, it's between the Cherokee Moors here. And the United States government was signed by Abdelhak and Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Yeah, the Cherokee had Arabic Hebrew names. Go and do your research. And on January 20th, 1790, the Free Moors Act allowed Moors to be tried as South Carolina citizens, which is state citizenship, as compared to federal citizenship, which is brought about by the 14th Amendment, which actually was never fully ratified. So technically, you're not a citizen of the United States Corporation. Now, you can have state citizenship if you so choose to, but even then, it's only based on privileges. All right? But here, South Carolina citizens rather than under the Negro Act. So Moors didn't want to be classified under the Negro Act. We don't want to be classified under the Negro Act today because they have the new Jim Crow law shit going on. Read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. So you want to be under the Negro Act, then that includes the new Jim Crow Act. All right? That's basically what that is telling you. Virginia passed 2 acts in 1682 that combined Native Americans and Africans into one category, Negroes and other slaves. The writing record of the voyage of 1524 of Giovanni di Verrazzano, recorded in a letter to Francis I, King of France, July 8th, 1524. Please note the description of the natives. He said they are dark in color, not unlike the Ethiopians, with thick black hair and not very long, tied back behind the heads like a small tail. As for the physique of these men, they was well proportionate, of medium height or a little taller than we are. They have broad chest, strong arms, and the legs and other parts of the bodies are well composed. Right? You can go to the Charlotte Observer right here in North Carolina, dated Sunday, August 15th, 1993. Stated that the North Carolina in 1690 reports the presence of Moors and that they are the ancestors of a people erroneously called Melungeons. Now, if you study Greek, Mel, as in Melchizedek, as in Melungeon, as in melanin, Mel means dark complexion or dark complexion, black. But we're talking about in Virginia, North Carolina to Florida, indigenous people. Here's a picture actually from a map showing that we was there in those places. All right. How did all this happen? Paper genocides of Native Americans from the 1790 census to the present. It's still going on. And this is from out of Virginia. This dude here, all right, his name is Walter Pluckert. Walter Pluckert plucked your ass out from the census and from the Register of Deeds and so forth and so on as being Aboriginal indigenous people here and made you Negroes, soon to be changed to colored, to black, to African American. 4 generations, 4 different So that means from your great-grandmother to your grandmother to your mother to you could have been Negro, colored, black, African American. Do that shit make sense to you? If you come from the same lineage, you, your mother, your grandmother, your great grandmother, and you'll get 4 different things on your birth certificates, according to United States Department of Interior agent Walter Plucker, all right, and government historian Jack Forbes states that Negro today are the descendants of these people called and referred to as the Choctaw, which is i.e. the Washita, Chickasaw, all right, the Creek, which is the Muskogee, the Yamasee, which is the Seminole, the Blackfoot, which is the Haliwa Sapani, the Shawnee, the Shoshone, and many other southern and eastern tribes. All right? That's who the Negroes are. This is your heritage. And of course, you have recent African blood in you because the Africans in which that came was here in the South. And when they was freed or when they ran away, they came to you because we look the same. We same. This is even what some of the so-called blacks was told when they went to Vietnam in the 60s and 70s. The Vietnamese told them, we same. Because in the mountain region of Vietnam were so-called black people. The Chickasaw Cherokee, the Chickasaw Choctaw Treaty of 1866 stipulates that all Negroes who were living within the territories of the Chickasaw and Choctaw nations during 1866 were protected by treaty with the United States. And their descendants are still protected under the same treaty today. When Negroes and descendants of Negroes are reclaimed back into their tribal communities, that people identify and stands in law changes, and he gains certain immunities as a indigenous, aborigine, she or he can no longer be treated as property, a citizen, or a slave under the state's law. That person is now under common international law jurisdiction and has human rights, right? So what did Walter Plucker do? Of the Virginia Vital Records began a paper terrorist, paper genocide trend that quickly spread throughout all 50 states and continued to this day. Plucker was a member of the eugenics movement, and Plucker had an agenda target at Indians, mixed races individuals, and blacks in the South, in the state of Virginia, which spread throughout all the states. Plucker internationally attempted to eliminate any evidence of any Indians in the state of Virginia in order to purify the white race. He did it on paper. Plucker modified birth records in the state of Virginia. I learned that in some cases, Plucker actually ordered any documentation record of any individual that indicated Indian destroyed as well. Plucker threatened midwives that indicated Indians as a race on the birth certificate. So Walter Ashby Plucker was the first registrar of Virginia's Bureau of Vital Statistics. This is why it's so hard for people to file their documentation, their paperwork in Virginia. All right, which records birth, marriages, and deaths. He accepted the job in 1912. For the next 34 years, he led the efforts to purify the white race in Virginia by forcing Indians and other non-whites to classify themselves as blacks. It amounted to bureaucracy genocides. With the stroke of a pen, Plucker could write an individual into Negro status and legal and social oblivion. Plucker was only too willing to exercise that power, thus making him a figure of dread to Indians in general, but particularly to the Powhatan remnants in Rockbridge and Amherst counties, which his retirement and subsequent death in 1946. Pluckett's no-nonsense approach made him a celebrity with the eugenics movement. So why was they so happy that even on paper they could erase your identity? Because it was part of the eugenics movement. You think eugenics is just population control agenda, them putting GMO in the food, lacing the skies with chemtrails, putting fluoride in the water. Oh no, this goes also to paper terrorism. And if you just want to be a vegan and vegetarian and you think that you're doing everything you possibly can, you know what I'm saying, about meditating and visualization, and you ain't got no documentation, well, guess what? The eugenics movement still move on your ass. It's still moving on your ass. All right. This was paper terrorism at its best. All right. This is why you need a nationality to deny the 3/5 status in the Constitution. Right. Which is claimed to have been ratified by the 14th Amendment being fully ratified by Congress, which is by 2/3, which it is not and has not been. He spoke around the country and was widely published and wrote to every governor in the nations to urge passage of racial laws just as tough as Virginia's. Okay? Just as tough. So he went around the whole country doing this shit. So he changed and or destroyed labels on vital records to classify Indians as coloreds, mongrels, mulattoes, Negroes, investigated the pedigrees of racially suspected citizens, and provided information to block or annul interracial marriages with whites. He not only did this to Indians, but other races as well. All right. So the area where paper genocides and reclassifying Indians to black, white, or mulatto was first practiced by government offices in the United States, later spread to all of America, or rather to all of the United States corporation. Because we are the only Americans up in this piece. All right. Now you can find this. This is Massachusetts. This is Indians enfranchised in 1800. Indians listed as colored. Right. So this is where we got the idea from. All right. Section 1. All Indians and people of color heretofore known or called Indians within this Commonwealth or hereby made and declared to be citizens of the Commonwealth and entitled to all rights, privileges, and immunities, subject to all the duties and liabilities to which citizens of the Commonwealth are entitled or subject. Section 2, all lands here heretofore known as Indian lands and rightfully held by any Indians in severity, and all such lands which has been or may be set or for any Indian shall be and become the property of such person or their heirs in fee simple, provided that such land should be held liable by taking upon attachment or execution for any debt or liability which exists before the passage of this act, and all Indians shall hereafter have the same rights as other citizens. So we find that the same right as other citizens was that them having to take on the colored label if they did not reside on a reservation. If you was not going to be on a reservation, then you had to take on the title colored. So here, many said Richard Thornton is nuts for saying that the Mayans were in Georgia. Well, Lorenzo Langley, forensics geologist and historian, has found much proof of Mayan Indian slaves in South and North Carolina and Virginia. Right? So Mayans, Olmecs, they were slaves. So that means that they didn't get all of us from Africa. They went down also into South America and also Mexico, Central America, and got slaves, Indian slaves. Now, of course, the Mayans are Olmecs, or children of the Olmecs, just like the Incas, the Toltecs, the Aztecs, etc. But by no means of Belize. The archives of Belize counts thousands of them being sold into the Carolinas. All right, Belize. Now, we spoke about this before, and we have a brother from Belize, Brother George or Jero Moore, and he can tell you about some of this. It says here to the right, in the area that is now Belize, the Mayans suffered and died under Spanish occupation. They was massacred and fled into the dense forests of central and western Belize for security. The British Buccaneers and pirates also attacked the mines along the coast of Belize. They raided and destroyed most of the Mayan settlements along the coast. They also stole food, enslaved the Mayans. Oh, there it is, enslaved the Mayans. And where did they bring them to? Oh, to the Carolinas, to Virginia, to Georgia. They also stole food, enslaved the Mayans, and kidnapped Mayan women and children. Some Mayans were even sold as slaves to British plantation owners and settlers in Jamaica. Some were also sold to the slave masters in southern states of the United States, especially North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. All right, so here, the commissions to the 5 civilized tribes, the Dawes Commission. The 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminoles were so called by the United States because they were more advanced, literate than many others and had adopted systems of government patterns after those of the United States. No, the United States government adopted their system from them and patterned their system after their system. All right, we know that for a fact. All right, it's called the Iroquois, and the Iroquois were the Cherokee, the Chickasaw. All right, who they also went, who was also who they went into treaty with, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship that the Moors are always talking about was not the Moors from out of Morocco, Africa, but the Moors here, Cherokee, who spoke Arabic and had Arabic names. All right, right here, even the word Moor in Webster's third national international dictionary tell you that Moors is one of a group of people of mixed Indian, white, and Negro ancestry in central Delaware. Compare Nanacoat. The Nanacoats were Moors. Get the article the Delaware Moors. Right? It says there have been much speculation about the so-called Moors living in Kent and Sussex counties, Delaware. These people are usually swarthy, black-haired, and black-eyed, and sometimes with a fair complexion. They are mostly farmers. They have their own schools, distinct from general public school system, and they associate neither with whites nor with so-called blacks. One theory has been that they are of Moorish race and that their ancestors were Spanish Moors wrecked on the coast more than a century ago. Of course, we know that that's not true. Another tradition represents them as descendants of the Nanaco Indians. Exactly. All right, the Lenape. This is who we're talking about. The Delaware Moors and the Nanacoes, which mean grandfathers, are the Lenape, the original. The word Lenape means the original people. You are the Lenape, the original people of Washita heritage. Right? Washita essentially means the priesthood, just like the Yamasee. The Yamasee is the priesthood. Right? The Nanacoes, and get the book, the Nanacoes and the Moor Folk Medicines. Get this book. The Delawares, the Shawnee, the Seneca, the Mohican, and other Eastern Indians claims that their forefathers originally received their knowledge of Mantapa Seacon from a tribe called the Nanacoes. All right, called the Nanacoes, the grandfathers. All right, by this time, the state legislation acknowledged that the Nanacote Moor Indian families are throughout the state. Right? And notice that is in Massachusetts. Now we're talking about all the way down into Delaware, New York, all right, all the way down into New Jersey, into all the way down into Maryland. All right, the Lenape, the Nanacoes, the Delaware Moors, same people. All right, you have Olivia Ward Bush Banks, all right, was a American author, poet, and journalist, but she had heritage from the Montauk Native American descent. Right, Ward was part of the same nation of indigenous people that Crispus Attucks and Wutamu was part of. All right, Crispus Attucks was Montauk. All right? But they told you that he was the first black to die. They love saying that shit. They love telling us that. Historians and unlearned so-called scholars like to say that the first man to die in the Revolutionary War was an African American man or an African man named Crispus Attucks. But what they fail to tell us is that Crispus Attucks' ancestors were indigenous to America. Attucks was Indian, as his mother was Massachusetts, right? Montauk, the tribe that gave the state its name. Crispus Attucks was a direct descendant of John Attucks, an Indian executed for treason in 1676 during the King Philip Wars, who was also indigenous. King Philip was indigenous. Right? So, right here, if you go to a museum, all right, go to a museum, Negroes. That's the problem now. You don't do your research and you don't go to museums. You don't go to libraries. You damn depend upon the internet for your information. But go to museums also. All right, go to mounds, go to pyramids where you can see and record this information yourself. Musi McCaw Museum. Notice that the American right above the head is Australoid. Notice that the Negroid right below is African. So Americans were Australoids. All right. Africans were Negroids based on this information here. Okay. So what happens? Well, you find that the Australoid, the Negroids, and the Negroes were all together. It says Australoids, Negroids, Negritos, and Negroes display perplexing disjunct distributions from which there is no historical explanation. Australoids, which is Aborigines from out of Australia, and the Negroids, which are the Aborigines from the Southern Pacific islands, and the Negroid and the Negroes, who are the Aborigines here in America, all right, alternate with one another in areas from Africa to Australia, but maintain their racial distinction throughout. A careful examination of this distribution plus examination of their culture shows a striking ecological correlation with the Negroids, always in the rainforest, and Australoids clinging to the open country. Two populations of the so-called full-size Negroes, Africans and Oceanic, are physically very similar, but are unrevocably distinct in origin. Well, I thought we all come from Africa. We all come from Africa. So what is the distinctions that they find in? I won't get into that right now, but let's look at it. James Churchward, in his book, Children of Mu, claims that there was 64 million people who died in the sinking. The Pacific Islands, Hawaii, and Hawaii's adjoining islands, which would have been the South Pacific Islands, are the remaining mountain peaks of the lost continent. Precise detailed maps of the lost continent of Mu and Atlantis are found on stone tablets from pre-Inca civilization in Peru by Dr. Javier Carrera, engraved in stone and photographed by Robert Chirac. In 1972, the United Nations diplomat Ferdinand Ishkovet, who was the assistant to the United Nations President Adam Malik, went to Maui, which is Mu, Hawaii, and researched the Lemurian ruins and history and concluded that it was real. So people talking about Lemuria and Atlantis was mythical and that it didn't exist. Well, the United Nations said otherwise. And they sent researchers. And we found that Kamehameha, the first and great king, to unify the Hawaiian Islands, the sovereign kingdom of Hawaii, formally established in 1810. As you see, melanated. As you see, The last queen, Liliu Kalani, melanated, so-called black. So everywhere the Albion goes, you see us. This is the Kamehameha's royal family of Hawaii. So-called black. So-called black Americans are not necessarily Indians, even though the word Indian stems from Indi or Indios, which means black people or God's people. But we actually are Aborigines. All right, we are Aborigines. All right, and the word Aborigine happens to be a noun. And guess what? We're told this if you go and research that this Alabama Senator, Scott Beason, is 100% right. As the native Mongoloids came to America way after our ancestors. In fact, Aborigine, noun, plural, noun, Aborigine, a person, all right, place, a thing, or animal, which is a noun, or plant that has been in a country or a region from the earliest times, an Aboriginal inhabitant of Australia. But we also know that American, by definition of Noah Webster Dictionary, 1849, 1854, 1859, 1828, says that American, the Aboriginal or color copper races found here by the Europeans. Found here where? In the Americas. So we are the Aboriginals, right? And this is what happened. This is actually the article, and it says Alabama state senators referred to blacks as Aborigines. And that's supposed to make your ass mad. Oh, these motherfuckers referred to as Aborigines? What the hell is this? Wow. Like they called you a motherfucker. No, they didn't. They said you was Aborigines, and people was getting upset about that. Oh no, I'm African American. I'm black. Anyway, Sunday, June 19th, 2011. Shit. This is exactly nearly 7 years ago. Alabama is currently going through a major federal corruption trial regarding alleged bribes offered to state legislators. Now let's come down. Beason and others are discussing the distress economic of Greene County, home to Green Track. That's y'all's Indians. Oh shit, now check this out now. That's y'all's Indians, said former state Republican Representative Benjamin Lewis. All right, that's what he said. That's y'all's Indians. Also, in private conversation, we're Indians to some of the Caucasians or Albions. So Beason had to correct him. He said, they're Aborigines, but they're not Indians. They're Aborigines, but they're not Indians, Beason responded. After these remarks became public, Beason claimed he didn't remember the conversation. And indeed didn't know why he used the term. Well, it sounded like he knew exactly the difference between Aborigines and Indians to me. Oh boy. Anyway, the term African American only existed since 1988. As we say, 1990. You only been in African American for the last 25 years or so. Of course, we know it's a little bit more than that, 30 years now. Prior to that, you were known as American Negroes. Thanks to Jesse Jackson for Afro-sizing your ass off your land. All right, so this nigga should be brought up on charges for deceiving the people. He made you African Americans instead of American Africans. The lie everybody believe? Facts. Aboriginal American Indians were captured. 8% of slaves came from Africa, right? So 8 to 15% slaves came from Africa. The African, right? The Roots, the movie came from the book African, a novel by Harold Carlander. Roots is a lie. Judge Ward stated Alex Haley perpetrated a hoax on the public. You can get that. Matter of fact, I went and got it. Shit, I ain't got to wait around for it. I go and do my research. Shit, I went to the Old Jet magazine. Oh, Old Jet, reliable jet. Y'all might not get jets nowadays, but shit, back in the 90s and 80s and 70s, shit, we used to get the jet like ebony. That was the Black Folks magazine. We ain't had no other magazines in the house. If you came to a nigga house and he ain't have the damn jet or damn ebony, something was wrong with that nigga. You knew it was. You knew it was something wrong with that nigga. He ain't had that damn jet up in there or that damn ebony. Anyway, we go to jet. Alex Haley settled suit out of court, $500,000. Why, Mr. Alex Haley? Why? Let's see. The Pulitzer Prize-winning author Alex Haley of Roots fame hammered out an out-of-court settlement with a white writer who charged that Haley had lifted 81 different passages from his book. In announcing the settlement before United States District Court Judge Robert Ward, Haley readily admitted that he was glad his latest legal ordeal was now behind him. Under terms of this agreement, Harold Corlander, who wrote The Africans in 1967, will be paid $500,000. The suit had been amicably settled out of court. Alex Haley acknowledged and regretted that the various materials from The African by Harold Corlander found their way into his book Roots. A statement said, throughout the 2 weeks long trial, Haley had maintained that he has never heard of The African, an assertion that prompted Judge Robert Ward to remark, that leaves me a little cold. Haley noted that often throughout his 12 years effort on Roots, countless people gave him material. To date, Haley's Roots had earned several million dollars, and recently he received $1 million from ABC TV for Roots. Of course, we know that now they done a year and a half ago, they did a goddamn remake of the shit. They done revised Roots for your ass. They done revised it. All right. Alex Haley, the United States government of 20-year veteran, the man that plagiarized Roots and made up the story of Kunta Kinte, was sued by Harold Corlander, the author of African, in 1978, and for plagiarism, and won over $500,000. This is where he got it from, was from this Albion right here at the bottom. And here go his cover, The African, Harold Corlander. And it says an extraordinary novel, not nonfiction, a novel. You know the difference? A novel of epic proportions exploring the transition from freedom to slavery. So Roots and the issue of plagiarism. Corlander wrote 7 novel fictions, his most famous being The African, published in 1967. The novel was the story of a slave captured in Africa, his experiments aboard a slave ship, and his struggle to retain his native culture in a hostile new world. In 1978, Corlander filed a lawsuit in the United States District Court from the Southern District of New York, charging that Alex Haley, the author of Roots, had copied 81 passages from his novel. 81. Corlander pretrial memorandum in the copyright infringement lawsuit claimed defendant Haley had access to and subsequently and substantially copied from The African. Without The African, Roots would have been a very different and less successful novel. Roots is a novel? Roots is a successful novel? A novel. Hold on, we're going to have to get there in a second. Indeed, it is doubtful that Mr. Haley could have written Roots without The African. Mr. Haley copied language, thoughts, attitudes, incidents, situations, plots, and characters. The lawsuit did not allege that the African's plot was copied in its entirety, as the two novels differs in many plot points. But 81 were. 81 were. Okay? So, right here, let's look at a couple. Corlander. To the damp stink foulness of the belly of the ship, there came to be added another torture, lice. They crawled on the face and drank the corners of the eyes. If the fingers caught the predator, it was killed between the fingernails. Now go to Alex Haley's roots. But the lights preferred to bite him on his, and they would suck at the liquids in the corners of Kunta's eyes, on the snot draining from his nostrils. He would squirm his body, and his fingers darting and pinching to crush any lights that he might trap between his nails. Wow. Interesting. That's very, very interesting. Because guess what? Negroes don't get lights. That's what happens when you copy shit. Gonna copy the damn story plot line here. This is just one example out of 81. We have 80 others, but this is just one. And is that Africans and African Americans don't get lights. Albion's have lights. See, this is what happens when you make shit up. When you make shit up. Alex Haley maintained throughout his trial that he had never heard of the African until years after Roots was published. Right. Right. Alex Haley novel Roots and the movie Roots about him tracing his ancestry back to West Africa is a hoax and a fraud. And the West African transatlantic slave trade is a lie. All right? And a fraud made up by Europeans just to deceive blacks. Right? A hoax how? A hoax that they brought all of us over here. That's how. Not that that slavery didn't happen, or that the slave trade did not happen or occur to some extent, but it's talking about 8 to 15% of our ancestry was brought over here recently. Not 100%. 100%. All right. That's not it. 85 to 92% of us, our ancestry was already here in the Western Hemisphere. In the adjoining islands called the Caribbeans or Americana, in the South, Central, and North America, and in the South Pacific. We was already here. Novel. Let's read. Remember, novel now. Remember, Alex Haley's book, The Roots, is a novel. What does novel mean? A fictitious prose narrative of book length, typically representing characters and actions with some degree of realism. Novel is a long narrative, normally in prose, which describes fictional characters and events, usually in the form of a sequential story. Wow. A fictitious book. A fictitious book. So starring Americans as Indians, Indians as blacks, blacks as niggers, niggers as coloreds, coloreds as Negroes, Negroes as African Americans. Oh shit, we got them all in there. We got them all in there. Oh, Henry Louis skipped Gates. He must have skipped over all of this information that I just presented. He skipped over all of this information to do the genetics tests on you to tell you that you all come from Africa and that you all was brought here by the European Albion 400 years ago. Yeah. With all these accolades, he's still a jackass. So what we mean by that, transatlantic slave trade is mostly fact or fiction. All right. I have 10 questions to ask. Well, let's say the average human body needs at least half a gallon to a gallon of water a day. If you look at the diagram of so-called big bottom ships, they would have carried about 400 so-called slaves. I call them POWs, with a crew of about 50 ship hands. You would see that it would take a lot of water. Humans can survive normally 3 to 4 days without water, and a maximum 8 to 10 days with severe limits. Now, understand is that you on the ocean. You cannot drink seawater, which is salt water. You would die. The air on the ocean is salty, and it will act as a desiccant. Thus, one needed more water to prevent dehydration. So you got to be concerned about your property. Now you capture your slaves, your POWs, they're your property. So 1 gallon of water is the equivalent of 8 pounds. It requires amount of potable water for a 90 voyage trip, such as a 90-day voyage, which 90 days is 3 months, y'all. 3 to 4 months is what you had to have potable water. And the transatlantic story, slave trade story, has it where it took anywhere from 81 to 162 tons of potable water. I did not even calculate the weight or space of barrels to hold the water, which would, and where would you keep it? It was a 90-day voyage on average, give or take a few days. The waterways alone would sink the ship. So the water weight alone would sink the ships, y'all. There is no way to contain the human waste in the ship, and cholera outbreaks would have wiped out the entire cargo and crew. Human excrement gives off gases of methane, chlorine, and ammonia, which are irritants to the lungs. Methane can cause asphyxiation in enclosed spaces, as well as being highly combustible. Means shit can light the fuck up. The amount of food needed for a voyage that long would have been immense. The average human body consumes about 4 pounds of food a day. 81 tons of food would have been required for this voyage. So between food and water, it would have been a requirement of 162 to 243 tons. We have not even factored in the human body weight. If you take an average, right, body weight of 150 pounds for cargo and crew, you would have another 33.75 tons. Now we are up to 195.75 to 276.75 tons. Do not forget to factor in the rogue waves and hurricanes. All right? These factors alone undermine this story from making any sense. Remember, we told you earlier that they got slaves from out of Mexico down into Central and South America, the adjoining islands, the Pacific Islands. Under critical scrutiny, you can tell that lies have been written to enforce the theft of land, especially when European explorers tell you through phenotypical descriptions of who they found here when they came here. So we went over how they say the so-called Indians or Moors looked when they came here. When they came here, they looked like you. How could anyone survive traveling by boat strapped down like this for 3 to 4 months straight? No food or water, environment, urine, feces, and diarrhea. The area could never be clean during travel. If anybody ever had cats or dogs in the home and they shitted on the damn floor, you know that's some goddamn. If you had some wood floors, you know that's a goddamn work a job. They had to do this during travel and much more. Who would clean it? These people would have drowned in their own shock, sorrow, sewage. They told a fantastic lie, but it's not true. These people would have been DOA, dead on arrival in America, not ready or able to build it up. Truth is, they found us in Mississippi River, sailed us around the Americas, and up and down the Atlantic Ocean and Caribbean for slave breaking. We did not come from Africa. They found us in America. We are the so-called Indians that they talked about, that they claimed that was the first ones that they put in slavery, the Moors. So all of this nonsense that y'all keep listening to SETI about, the Moors enslaved the Africans. Motherfucker, you are the Moors and your ass was enslaved. That dumb shit. Between 1650 and 1860, approximately 10 to 15 million enslaved people were transported from Western Africa to the Americas. Most were shipped to the West Indies, Central America, and South America. This is what we've been told. But notice, less than 0.5 million came to the Americas. And we're talking about specifically North America. North America. They claimed 4.5 went to the Caribbean. They claimed that 0.2 million, which is 200,000, went to Central America. They claimed that 0.5, which is 500,000, went to West South America, and 5 million went to Brazil. Okay, but less than 0.5 million, which is all right. So what is the truth of the slave trade? Well, guess what? According to Emory University reports on the transatlantic slave trade, approximately 30,000 to 35,000 recorded ships or voyages were made between the years 1560 to 1865, or 305 years approximately. 200 POWs, so-called ships or bondmen, bondwomen, was aboard each ship. Some scholars give that some ships carried up to 500 POWs. So between 200 to 500 POWs. That average out to be 6 million to 17.5 million indentured servants or said slaves. According to Wikipedia, 12 million Africans were shipped to the Americas, North, Central, and South America from the 1600s to the 19th century, right, or 16th century to the 19th century. And of these, an approximately 645,000 was brought to what is now the United States. So we went from 500,000 to 645,000. All right. And actually from 400,000 to 500,000 to 645,000. So we know somewhere between 400,000 to 645,000 Africans came. The largest number of ships to Brazil. The slave population in the United States has grown to 4 million by 1860 census. And an estimate of 10 million slaves crossed the Red Sea, Indian Ocean, and Sahara Desert from 650 to 1900, more than 1,000 years, compared to more than 11,656,000 that arrived officially across the Atlantic from 1500 to 1900. No historian can offer anything beyond speculation for this number. Once again, no historian can offer anything beyond speculation for this number, since records do not exist anywhere to support any claims either way. So not only did they get rid of the ships, but also the records? Wow. Wow. So they don't have the records and they don't have the ships. That's some fishy shit. But Jesus was the name of the slave ship captained by Sir John Hawkey in 1564 by appointment of the Queen of England. This is not a coincidence nor accidental that the similarities in the is present. This is a political machination of subliminal science via political oppression of religion, mental slavery to destroy all said people of color, no matter what title, name, or culture that you associate with or profess in. Look at the cover of the Bible and look how it looks just like that drawn ship that they always show us. They always show us that same exact drawn ship. And it looks just like the exact symbol on the Bible, the Holy Biblios. All right, the Helios Bibliothek. All right, let's get into what the general said, the real general, Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad. He said, Africa is not our home. Africa is our throne. And from our throne, we ruled our home, which is 196,940,000 square miles of the planet Earth. You just want to claim a spot or the whole thing? I'm claiming the whole goddamn thing. Claiming. And I'm a more. I don't know what you're talking about either, Nick Rose. And ain't Kuta Kinte either. Huh? And it ain't Kuta Kinte either. Because Kunta Kinte was a fiction. Remember? A novel. A fiction. Anyway, this is Frederick Douglass. You know, you have some out there talking about that they came from Frederick Douglass, but let's see what Frederick Douglass speaks about here. Frederick Douglass, he goes in. All right, he goes in. This is Frederick Douglass. This is Rochester, New York, January 26, 1849. He said, here we have the old colonized spirit revised. All right, the impudent proposition entertained by the Senate of the United States of expelling the free colored people from the United States, their native land. Oh shit, now hold up. Did he say what I think he just said? Let's look at that shit again. Frederick Douglass. Here we have the old colonization spirit revived. See, that's what's going on now. They trying to revive. Remember, they're trying to make America great again. Oh, shit. We're going to make America great again, Bob. The United States of the Senate of the United States of expelling the free colored people from the United States, their native land? He said the free colored people from the United States, their native land. Native land. Look up the word indigenous and you will find that the word native and indigenous are interchangeable. Even though indigenous has a little bit more concrete because it deals with their genes. This is what you get: indigenous, indigenous, genes. To Liberia? In view of this proposition, we would respectfully suggest to the Assembly Wisdom of the Nation that it might be well to assert the number of free colored people who would be likely to need assistance of the government to help them out of this country to Liberia or elsewhere beyond the limits of this United States, since this course may save any embarrassment which would result from appropriation more than commensurate to the numbers who might be disposed to leave this. Our own country. Our own country. For one we know not of. We don't know of Liberia. We know of this country. We know of our own country. We are of the opinion that the free colored people generally means to live in America and not in Africa. So it's not saying that you can't go to Africa and do business, have a home there. Of course you can. We're Pan-Africanists based on the theory that we came from out of Africa. 2.8 billion years and over and counting. But all so-called races came from out of Africa based on Richard Leakey and Louis B. Leakey, who leaked it out in the 1950s. All right? But Europeans ain't around here calling themselves African Europeans. Asians ain't around here calling themselves African Asians because they came from out of Africa, are they? We do not mean to go, he says, we do not mean to go to Liberia. Our minds are made up to live here if we can, or die here if we must. So every attempt to remove us will be as it ought to be, labor loss. Here we are, and here we shall remain. While our brethren are in bondage and on these shores, it is idle to think of inducing any considerable number to the free colored people to quit this for a foreign land. So where are we from, according to Frederick Douglass? From here. Get the book, Miseducation of a Negro by Carter G. Woodson. You ain't got it yet? But God damn it, you won't get it today. You won't get this work today. You won't get this work today. Much ado about a name. It is much ado about a name because this is what the problem is. This is what Negroes are debating about today. What's my name, boss? What my name going to be today, boss? I like black. I like black, boss. Well, I like African-American, boss. Well, I like Negro, boss. Shit, what's the problem? Shit, I go with nigga. What the fuck? Anyway, a participant who recently attended a historical meeting desired to take up the question as to what the race shall be called. Africans, Negroes, colored people, or what? This is a matter of much concern to him because he hopes thereby to solve the race problem. The word Negro or black is used in reference to this particular element because most people of native African descent approaches this color. This term does not imply that every Negro is black. And the word white does not mean that every white man is actually white. Negroes may be colored, but many Caucasians are scientifically classified as colored. Uh-oh. Remember, we asked the question, who's the original man? Well, we also asked, who's the white man? And it's the colored man. He's the colored man, according to the lessons. And this is where, this is what is being told to us right here. This is in the Nation of Gods and Earth. This is in all the 5%ers. This is also in the Nation of Islam. About the colored man being the Caucasian or the white man, pale man, the Albion. All right. And for all those that have a problem with saying white person is in the Black's Law Dictionary, Caucasians. However, free white person does not apply to Caucasians. Case closed. Negroes may be colored, but many Caucasians are scientifically classified as colored. We are not all Africans. Oh shit. What the hell do Carter G. Woodson, what the hell was Carter G. Woodson on back in the 1920s, writing this shit here? Almost 100 years ago, this nigga was saying, we are not all Africans. Moreover, because many of us were not born in Africa. And we are not all Afro-Americans because few of us are natives of Africans transplanted to America. Oh, wait, hold up. Is this nigga saying that the slave trade didn't happen? Or that there wasn't a lot of Negroes that came over here from Africa? What do he mean by this? We are not all Afro-Americans because few of us are natives of Africa transplanted to America. Sound like he was trying to correct the miseducation of a Negro back in the 1920s, 100 years ago. He was trying to correct that. We still ain't got the shit yet. We still much ado about a name. But this is in the miseducation of a Negro. Carter G. Woodson. Read it. Right? Read it. This is my last slide for the night, damn it. I'm about tired of all this nonsense out here on the internet. Coming with no information, just niggas' opinions. Return of the Ancient Ones. Return of the Ancient One. The Moorish Nagger, the Dragon Rider, a breathing fire, generator, operator, destroyer. Return of the Ancient Ones. All right, in loving memory of the Empress Verdiasi Tierra Washington Gaston El-Bey. All right, who passed on my born day 4 years ago. She wrote on a book, all right, that 85% of the blacks over here in America were already here before the slave trade. Only 15% of blacks came from Africa. Well, damn, wouldn't that correlate to the fact of what Carter G. Woodson said? We are not all Africans. Moreover, because many of us were not born in Africa, and we are not all Afro-American, so he didn't like African-American either. Why he didn't like Afro-American or African-American? Because few of us are natives of Africa transplanted to America. Case closed, goddammit. Right? I was going to end it, but goddammit, I got to go on. Anyway, Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz said, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. My brothers and sisters, Plymouth Rock landed on us. What he meant by that? We was already here. Malcolm goes further in Black Man's History. He says those people who were here before Adam. He always referred to these people as Aborigines. So Malcolm called us Aborigines too, just like Scott Beason, the Alabama senator that we went over earlier. Which means what? Black folk. You never find a white Aborigine. Aborigines are called natives. And they are always dark-skinned people. You and I are Aborigines, but you don't like to be called an Aborigine. You want to be called in America, or rather nowadays a U.S. citizen. Aborigines originally means from the beginning. It's two Latin words, ab meaning from, and origine means the beginning. And Aborigine is only the term applied to those dark-skinned people who have been on this earth since the beginning of the universe. You know that goes way back. What do you mean? Since the beginning of the universe. Wow. So not only did Malcolm say Plymouth Rock landed on us, but God damn it, Martin Luther the King said it. Before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, we were here. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. Look, I'm going through all your great African American scholars and leaders. And they all saying the same thing. You was already here. You was already here. Letter from Birmingham jail. Martin Luther the King, 1963. He already told you that before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, we were here. All right? You want to read the whole thing? Let's read it. Here it go. We will reach the goal of freedom in Birmingham and all over the nation, because the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with the destiny of America. Before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before the pen of Jefferson scratched across the pages of history the majestic words of the Declaration of Independence, we were here. If the inexpressible cruelties of slavery could not stop us, the oppression we now face will surely fail. We will win our freedom because the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of God are embodied in our echoing demands. Wow. Even in Martin Luther the King, I Have a Dream speech, he says, but 100 years later, the Negro still is not free, languishing in the corners of America's society, and finds himself in exile in his own land, in his own land, in his own land. Wow, there it is. This is Martin Luther the King incarnated. All right, he was an Olmec Mayan years ago, as you see here. An Olmec Mayan years ago, as you see here. That's Martin Luther the King then, Martin Luther the King now, and it was our land then, and it's your goddamn land now. Peace. Any questions? No.